today for lunch, we could have an hour and a half. We have a couple of witnesses coming in from Atlanta that we haven't been able to speak with, and I think I would just request that we be allowed to have a little bit of extra time to do that today over lunch.
Are it 15 minutes?
If that's what I'm going to get us, I'm good.
An hour and 20 minutes?
Yes, Judge, I'll let you keep going, but.
I bet I could.
Okay.
And you know an hour and 20 minutes means an hour and a half around here.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, seriously. No, let's say for an hour and 20 minutes.
Thank you.
I mean, the jury.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Let's all rise for the jury, please. Watch your step. Please be seated.
Mr. Evans.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
All right, couple of things, Detective. First of all, there's been a lot of discussion about memes, which is M-E-M-E, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it occurred to me yesterday evening that we may not have adequately explained for our record exactly what a meme is. I think people are kind of getting the idea of it, but some people are more technologically savvy than another. So we use, just by way of example, States 399. When you're referring to a meme, are you referring to a picture that has words on it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think most everybody got that, but I want to make sure we're making a good record as well, and just in case somebody may not know. All right. In your work with the high-tech crime unit, you were asked yesterday about whether any of the messages appear to be hidden from the timeline. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I want to ask you a different kind of question. Are you familiar with apps that one can get for their mobile device that allows you to hide things on your phone?
Yes.
And as part of your work with the high-tech crime unit, have you come across those apps before?
Yes, I have.
Yesterday, we were looking through the project tree. I think that's what you called it, correct?
Yes.
And on the project tree, they have a list of things. Some of them had a check, some of them had an X to show whether they were on the phone or whether they'd been taken off the phone. Do you remember that?
I don't recall that in the project tree.
Okay. Where was that then?
You're referring to the blue checks?
Yes, I am.
Okay, those were decoded. That was an indication of decoding that had occurred within Celebrite.
Is there any way, just using the Celebrite report without going to the phone itself, to know whether an app is hidden anywhere on the phone versus whether it's readily apparent by just powering on the phone? Is there a column, another way, that delineates?
No, there is not a column within Celebrite that would denote that.
If one were to turn on the phone and look for it, though, might you be able to find it that way?
That is a possibility.
Okay. I want to ask you, did you specifically look on the actual handset itself after you did the extraction in this case, or was that left to somebody else?
I did not. The original extraction of the 5S was conducted by Detective Yeager. That was the device that I was just asked to generate the report out of.
Gotcha.
Initially.
You were asked some questions. We'll use Defendant 51, which is a list of the web searches. And one of them, item 4, let's go to this one first. Item 2, you were asked about was passport. What's the word after passport?
Fees.
Fees, okay. And then what the defense put in 54 and 55, those are costs associated. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Did you see anything in this to actually show an application for a passport versus what are the listed fees?
No, it did not.
There was a discussion yesterday about a click on a Google search that went to Ghana. That's 20. I want to focus your attention on 23. prior to that, what was that Google search?
It appears to be an attempt for someone to spell gonorrhea.
Gonorrhea. And it's
Gonorrhea.
is it spelled correctly or is it misspelled?
It would be badly misspelled.
Can you spell how it's spelled in that Google search?
Ghomonnoreah.
However, it's actually spelled. There's an M in there that probably shouldn't be there. Would you agree?
Yes.
And that's just 2 entries before the clip that shows Ghana as in the country in Africa.
It is.
Okay. I want to ask you about weatherprediction.com. So this is not lost on the jury. Looking at Defendant's Exhibit 51, I believe it's item number 4, correct?
Yes.
What
It
is the date and time of that Google search of weatherpredictor.com?
The date and timestamp indicates June the 17th, 2014.
I'm sorry. That was a misstatement of the evidence. The item 4, there is not a Google search for the weatherpredictor.com. It's not.
Let me rephrase it. What is the date and time associated with the weatherprediction.com from that phone?
The date and time is June 17th, 2014, 9:12 and 56 seconds a.m.
And in the column just to the left of that on Defendant's 51, what's the title associated with that?
Why are hot and humid days often hazy? Question mark.
You didn't do any computer work in this case, correct?
I did not.
You're familiar with how that process is done at the high-tech crimes unit, but it's not your specific specialty. Is that correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you about a couple of things. I'm going to get you to step down. Take a look at this. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. All right, can you make this exchange larger? This is the exchange between Leanna Harris and the defendant that the defense has pointed out to you. Can you expand that?
In the conversation.
Conversation mode? Yes. All right. Let's go down to that. The last chat before the 18th, on June June the 17th of 2014. What's displayed there coming from defendant's phone?
I've got Cooper.
Do you know how that appears on the actual handset itself? Have you looked at that?
I have not.
And that's just before the text you were asked about from the 18th, get to work okay?
Yes, I believe so.
Is that the last text that you saw between the two of them prior to the inquiry that Leanna Harris made about getting to work okay?
Yes.
Can you please go to apps?
Installed application?
Yes. I want to know, can you tell me whether there's any weather apps installed on the phone? Let's scroll down to the W and see if any happen to be listed there.
I don't believe they're in alphabetical order.
They're not, okay. Can you search it and go see if any come up? Right. So when you did that in the app section, at least two different apps came up, is that correct? Weather QWC and weatherbug.pro?
Yes.
Okay. Next thing I want to ask you about, while you're up here. All right, can you go to the history, the timeline that we were looking at yesterday?
The web history?
I want to look at the timeline of
Okay.
the activity on the phone. And then scroll all the way down to the 18th, if you will. And I want to look at the morning of the 18th, around the time of the WISP proposed. What's the gap in time from the conversation? Let's see. Do you recall what the gap in time was from the conversation between the WISP post and then the next messaging?
I
Okay. Do you know how to get to that feature? Or would that be an extraction summary?
don't know that I'm following, what you want.
Which one do you have to click on to show the gap? Can I get the gap in time between the messages? Yeah, chats. Let's try chats.
Okay.
You see what I'm getting at?
I believe I do from chats.
Okay, very good. That's what I'm trying to look at, is what's the gap in time between the chats around 9 o'clock in the morning?
Okay, so we'll go back. Sorry. Are you referring
Yes.
to that post?
I am.
Okay.
Give us a specific time for that post.
Beginning and ending?
Yes.
Okay. The first response to the post was on June 18th, 2014 at 8:55 and 19 seconds a.m.
And then just go, let's go to the last one.
And the last one is same date at 9:24, 28 seconds in.
All right. And it is the word son mentioned anywhere in this dialogue that's going on between the defendant and the person who posted this on Whisper?
Yes.
Okay, what time is that?
At 9:15 and 33 seconds.
You can come have a seat, and you can confirm for me that states 400 accurately documents what we just talked about. Is that correct?
Yes.
With the time stamps for it.
Yes, it does.
shouldn't have had you sat down. I need to ask you about web history. Can you come down here and look at the date and time of the web history? Or actually, we can maybe use it from the defendants. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the entirety of the web history that you were able to extract from the iPhone 5, is that correct?
Yes, it was the entirety that was displayed.
And I'd asked you yesterday,
Parsed.
I had asked you yesterday whether it's possible to delete web history or whether there are apps that might do that, correct?
Yes.
Looking at this web history here, can you tell me, do you see any web history searches prior to June the 17th of 2014?
No, not by date and time last visit.
The defense asked you about a specific message exchange between defendant and Leanna Harris. It's their exhibit number 68. And looking at 68, they asked you the question, did the defendant ask, when are you getting my buddy? What time was that?
That is on the 18th of June, 2014, at 3:16 and 22 seconds p.m.
Do you have any independent knowledge based on your investigation of whether that had already been decided before he sent that message?
No.
Is it possible?
Objection, calls for speculation.
This is Dave.
Let me ask you this. There were some posts that the defense put up. Did you review all of the messages on the phone?
No.
There are a lot of them. Would you agree?
Yes, there are many.
I want to ask you about two specific posts. This is State's Exhibit 2, Defendant's Exhibit 65. And the time on Defendant's Exhibit 65, for the records, a picture of a touch-tone dial. What's the time associated with the exchange on this one?
10:46 and 34 seconds a.m. on the 18th.
Okay.
Also June.
Not 8:46? If somebody said that this occurred on 8:46 as opposed to 10:46, they'd be wrong?
They'd be wrong.
Defendant's Exhibit 63. Looking at 63. What's the first response time to Defendant 63, which is to the post 2 weeks until I go to PCB? What's that first response time?
The first response time is at 9:49 and 01 seconds a.m. on June the 18th, 2014.
Not 8:49 in the morning?
No,
If somebody said that was posted at 8:49, would they be wrong?
they would be wrong.
And then, so this is not lost on the jury. I need to ask you this. There was some questioning about how you were able to confirm that this was the defendant's handset responding to the whisper post, because it says unknown admittedly, correct?
Yes,
And you had a mechanism to do that to be doubly sure that those responses were coming from the iPhone 5?
I chose to look into the original extraction using Physical Analyzer, which is a different tool than the reader that we're seeing here displayed. And I'm looking at the full set of data, the TAR file, that's the original extraction. And in that, I can look into the databases. And in the SQL database, there's a message. For this message, it has its own string, and it indicates in one of the columns whether it was MINE, mine, and then whether the information, I believe, is read or sent. But But there are other columns identifying, and then out at the end of that column, in the table view, you can actually read these individual posts. But I can tell the ones that indicate mine actually have a 1 in them. The ones that on here are listed with the
green.
No, with the blue that actually have the always in my feelings, probably the username for that Whisper account. Those don't have a 1 regarding their messages in the table view of the database.
All right. I think that that's all I have. Let me just collect these items. You don't have any with you, do you?
I do not.
Detective Smith, I'm not going to ask you to step down here, but if you don't mind just standing up so that you can get, or if you're good there, can you see?
Depends on what I'm looking.
Okay. Well, maybe I ought to have you step down.
I think you probably should, because I can't read anything.
All right. Thank you.
Not from the display.
All right. You were asked on redirect about the timeline regarding the conversation and the whisper image. This is the timeline for all the activity on the phone, correct?
All the activity that was decoded,
That was
that would then be sent to the time.
That's on this phone, correct?
All of the activity that was decoded and sent to the time.
Okay.
Report out.
The way that it's set up now, is it in chronological order, or is it necessary to kind of regroup or reformat these groups here so that it flows directly in chronological order?
I believe it's in chronological order.
Okay. Well, if you look at 6:17, 6:23:49 p.m., I mean, that's not the last thing that happened on his phone on June the 17th, correct?
I don't know, I'm looking just at the
Okay.
timeline. That's only for the items that are shown here in the timeline.
Well, I mean, Mr. Evans set this up, and he asked you to pay attention to the timing of the morning regarding the red image. I mean, nowhere in this timeline here for 6/18/2014, it appears that the first thing that's pulled up is occurring at 10:49:36 in the morning on June the 18th. And that would be after the red image, correct?
Yes, it would. This is just the timeline. These are the items that have been pushed to the timeline.
Okay.
Obviously, the chats from, in particular, the Whisper of that morning are not here. They're not in this timeline, just one pushed to the timeline.
So if we clear this out, now we get a full picture of what was going on with his phone that morning, correct?
The items that were recognized, decoded, and pushed to the time.
All right, and I'm just going to scroll all the way down to 6:18.
And I don't recall. Did you enter the information in the project search?
I did not.
I didn't realize there was anything entered in the project search to change the need.
Fair to say there's a lot of activity on the phone leading up to June the 18th. A lot of instant messages, it appears.
Yes.
All right. And your testimony on redirect was you chose to look at one image to determine who Ross Harris, or which part of the communication was Ross Harris. far as the whisper chats? You said you chose to look at one image, is that correct?
I was specifically asked to address that image.
Just one
and
image.
Whisper chat
Okay.
associated with that one image, the image that we've been referring to, the red image. That's what you referred to earlier. And so, yes, that was the one image I was asked to address.
And we're still scrolling, so, I mean, going through all these instant messages, and we're still on the 16th here, who asked you to only look at one image?
Detective Scott.
Okay. All right, and I think we're getting close. Good, here we are. All right. We know that Mr. Harris got to the Chick-fil-A just before 9 a.m., correct?
Yes.
I think he testified at 8:59
I believe that's when he's actually.
at the counter. Okay, so he's at the counter at 8:59, correct? And so this message here at 8:55:19 in the morning, that would be before he's at the counter at Chick-fil-A, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
If we accept the time, okay, not this timeline, the timeline of events.
You accept this timeline, correct?
Yes,
This is accurate.
I believe so.
Okay. Best you can tell, because you looked at the times on the Chick-fil-A video.
Yes.
This message is before he's at the counter at Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
Okay. This calendar entry here, this is not something that is user-driven. This could be an automatic entry on Facebook. If, for example, he's invited to some event, okay, there could be a push notification to that application on Facebook that enters this data that you would detect in the forensic analysis report, correct?
Yes.
In other words, this may not be Ross Harris doing anything on calendar.
Correct.
Okay. And then there's an instant message from Magnolia Blonde that pushes to his phone at 9:10 a.m. Okay. Having gone through the whisper images, we have no way of knowing if a particular image or message was read, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
I may not be following. Just in whisper?
Yes, just in whisper.
Okay.
Would you like for me to show
Well,
you an
that's-
example?
An example of one being read?
No, no. An example of a whisper chat that shows there's no time for when a message was read. Only when a message was delivered, sent.
Okay.
Isn't that true?
I don't recall.
Okay, let's do it. Let's be accurate. Let's just look at the red image that we know Mr. Harris did not create. Okay. Important to note, Mr. Evans asked you about when, what time an image was created. We don't have that information on the Celebrite, on the UFED report. When this image was created and posted to Whisper by someone else, we don't know that based on this information.
Based on this information.
And we don't know when this username unknown read or saw this red image.
I know.
All we know is when this was sent. This comment was sent. 6/18/2014 at 8:55:19 in the morning. Correct?
That is correct.
All right. And so if we go back to the timeline, just to be sure, all right, you would agree that this message here, okay, sent before he's at the counter at Chick-fil-A, this comment from Magnolia Blonde, who's not Ross Harris, there's no way of knowing if he read this or when he read this. No way of knowing.
I don't.
Okay? no way of knowing if or when Ross Harris read, yeah, I have nothing, every ounce of me is in being a perfect, unappreciated wife with two little ones that drain out the rest of me. I don't resent my kids, I resent him. You don't know when Ross Harris read that comment, correct?
I don't, but I see a response 3 minutes later,
Okay.
less than 3 minutes later.
All right.
And the response seems to be in response to that post. So
Okay, right.
I do assume that it was read.
That's right.
In between that time, the post time,
And-
and the next posting, which is from his time.
Okay. And so his response to Always in My Feelings is at 9:15, 15 seconds a.m., right? So that's somewhere, okay, between 9:12:54 and 9:15, 15 seconds. Mr. Harris must have seen this comment.
Yes.
He's responding to it. But it could be 2 seconds before.
It could be.
Right? I mean, it could be right after. Okay? But the best evidence that we have is this is when he sends it 9:15, 15 seconds. Okay? We know he's at Chick-fil-A during this time period. Of all the messaging that's going on, tons of messaging. I mean, it took a while to scroll just to the instant message the morning of June the 18th. You'd agree that there is 25-minute gap between user activity at Chick-fil-A? Take a look at the times.
I'm not seeing a 25-minute gap.
Well,
It's just seeing 9:12:54. Let's say that's 13, and 5 minutes before that is 18.
Okay, so worst case scenario, 18 minutes. And that's assuming that as soon as this message from Always in My Feelings, that as soon as it comes in, he sees it. Right? That's the assumption.
Okay.
Okay? Assume that he doesn't see that message, okay, until, well, he doesn't see any message until 9:14:21 seconds, where he responds, Atlanta, you. Okay? You'd agree then that that's going to add a couple more minutes, right? 20 minutes.
Are we only speaking about the whisper post, the red image that we're referring to?
No, because that's why we're looking at the timeline.
Okay.
This is everything.
Then my calculation just a moment ago, speaking only of the red image and the response to that, 13 minutes is backed up by 3 minutes.
But again, you just specified you don't know when he saw that.
I notice now that there's a "Where you from, Atlanta, you"
Right, right.
that you didn't necessarily point out. Just now noticing that I haven't studied this intently for this particular purpose, recalling that I was looking at the one whisper post.
Under your assumption, there's 18 minutes where he's not actively texting, sending messages while at Chick-fil-A.
And with my last testimony, it would be backed up by 3 minutes, so 15 minutes.
Under your assumption
Under that assumption.
that he's staring at his phone and he's seeing things as they come in. You're not aware of any evidence that he's staring at his phone while at Chick-fil-A.
I'm not.
What you know is that he took his son to Chick-fil-A
I have reviewed that portion of it.
and he had breakfast with his son.
Yes.
If you'll take the stand, I'm done with the big screen.
Okay.
The state drew your attention back to applications that delete content. Didn't make much of a point yesterday about it, but I'll just come right out and say it. I mean, we went through the installed applications on the phone. You didn't find any applications that you're aware of that delete content, correct?
I didn't find any that showed installed under the application view of the device.
And simply because the web visits and the web history don't show more than 47 entries doesn't mean that Ross Harris deleted anything, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Why
I
it
mean,
doesn't show.
we talked about the limitations of one Celebrite software version and another, right?
Yes.
Okay? The first time there was an extraction and a report done, okay, there were no comments regarding any of the whisper images that were found, correct?
The chats associated with the images had not been decoded.
Right. And no one's suggesting that Ross Harris hid those communications from anyone. It's just that Celebrite came out with a new version of the software that was able to get more data out of the phone, or decode more data. You were going to jump on me about that, and I appreciate it. You were paying attention. The new version decodes more information.
Yeah, it was there all along. All of the information was there.
And while the state wants to suggest that Ross Harris hid something or deleted something, you've got no evidence of that. Correct?
I do not.
Thank you.
Somebody who looked at the actual phone, though, might have that evidence.
Calls for speculation?
Let me ask you about a text. I'll move on, Judge. If you'll step down, please.
Okay.
Should have had you wear your Nikes today for your exercise. All right.
I'll be Vanna White.
Thank you, Vanna. If you'll look at this conversation that Mr. Rodriguez was asking about, and we're not displaying it right now. You got it? All right. Looking at this that's displayed here, while it admittedly, there's no date or time associated with the initial mean, correct?
There's not here.
Sure.
Decoded and visible.
But if we do look at the entirety of the exchange in context, we certainly have some sort of window about when it was viewed because there's a response, correct?
I believe so.
All right, let's display the image first. What's that image?
That's a rabbit.
What?
Other rabbits in the background.
What does it say?
I can make myself orgasm in less than 10 seconds with my vibrator.
All right, let's go back to the response from Mr. Harris. What time is that response?
At 7:43 and 44 seconds a.m. The response is nice.
And when's his next response?
7:43 and 54 seconds a.m.
And what is it?
I bet sex with you is amazing.
And what does Magnolia Blonde say thereafter?
Laughing out loud, I've been told so.
And does Mr. Harris respond to that? And what time?
He does. Sadly, I can't experience it. And the time was 7:50 and 2 seconds a.m.
And does he say something else thereafter?
He does.
What's that?
Would be nice.
What time is that?
7:50 and 6 seconds a.m.
And does Magnolia Blonde send a response, Mr. Harris?
Yes. Where are you from?
And what time is that sent?
9, 10, and 8 seconds a.m.
I know you haven't reviewed the full video footage in a while, but do you recall that the video catches both when Mr. Harris enters and leaves Chick-fil-A? Do you remember
Yes.
that? If we assume that he's still there at that time, this end of the exchange will be going on while he's at Chick-fil-A with his son?
I believe so.
And then does he respond back to Magnolia Blonde's inquiry about where he's from?
Yes.
What does he say and when does he say it?
Atlanta, U, question mark, 9:14 and 23 seconds.
You can see.
Okay.
So contextually, would you agree you're able to go back and look at specific exchanges to be able to at least get some sort of feeling for when times are, even though the initial mean may not have a time and date associated with it?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Alexandra Swindell.
Have a seat, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you could introduce yourself to us by giving your first and last name and spelling it for the court reporter, that's this gentleman seated right here to your right.
Hi. Alexandra Swindell, ALEXANDRA SWINDELL.
Miss Swindell, where do you live? Just
Alabama.
generally, okay. And how old are you?
23,
And are you in school or working right now?
working.
All right. And what's your education?
Went to Alabama and got my marketing degree
When did you graduate?
last December.
Take you back to 2012, 2013 and ask you, during that time, were you using any type of social media?
Yes.
And do you recall what types of applications you may have been using during that time?
Scout, Kick, Facebook, Twitter.
Specifically thinking back to that time and what screen names you may have been using, do you recall what name you were going by?
Bama Lady 15.
And again, looking during that time frame in your life using Scout, did you come into contact with a user who went by the name of Bama XH?
Yes.
Did you engage in conversation with the user Bama XH during that time?
Yes.
And if you could generally describe the nature of those conversations to the jury.
Mostly sexual.
And during that time, and I'll just ask you, in your life, have you ever been married?
No.
And do you have any children?
No.
During the time you were engaging in conversations with Bama XH on the application Scout, did you at some point move to a different application?
Yes.
Do you recall about how long you used Scout before you moved over to Kick?
Probably not very long.
During the time you were messaging with Bama XH on Kick, were there any photographs exchanged?
Yes.
What, again, if you could describe for the jury, was the nature of those photographs?
Mostly sexual.
And to be fair, Ms. Swindell, those photographs, were they exchanged by both of you?
Yes.
So in other words, did you send photographs to Bama XH?
Yes.
And did Bama XH send photographs back to you?
Yes.
During that time, did you have any idea of where this person was from, where they lived?
I assumed Tuscaloosa.
And was there any conversation that you can recall about meeting in person with Bama XH during that time?
Yes, he would try and get me to come see him. He said he worked for the university and he would try to get me to come see him in his office.
Did there ever come a time where you actually agreed to meet up with a person you knew only as Bama XH?
Yes.
If you could describe for the jury where that encounter took place and what happened.
He picked me up from my dorm room and we drove to some back road, I'm not really sure where it was, and parked and talking and kissing, and then eventually I performed oral sex on him, and then he drove me back home.
During the time leading up to the encounter that you had with Bama XH, and let me ask you for the jury's clarification, do you recall when that may have taken place?
I believe late 2012. It would have been before February 2013.
And if you could describe for the jury how it is that your memory is clear of that, why it would be during that time.
I started a relationship with someone else.
And during the time leading up to that time in 2013 when you actually met up with Bama XH, did he ever describe to you whether or not he was in a relationship or married or anything like that?
He told me he had a girlfriend. And I think eventually he said they were engaged, but never married, never kids.
Did Bama XH ever mention anything about his son Cooper?
No.
After the encounter in 2013, did you stay in contact with Bama XH, or can you describe for the jury how things went from that point forward?
We never met again, but occasionally would talk. Not very often.
Do you recall a time when you began chatting with Bama XH in 2014?
Yes.
Now, at this time, I'm showing the opposing counsel what's been previously marked for identification as the state's exhibits 403, 404, 405, and 406. Ms. Swindell, I have some items that have been previously marked for identification I want to show to you, but before I do that, do you see anyone in this courtroom that you recognize to be the person who went by Bama XH who you met up with in 2013?
Yes.
Could you please identify him for me by pointing out what he is wearing?
White shirt and a tie.
And what color tie?
I can't see it.
Okay. If you could tell me the position in the room which he is seated.
On the right, navy tie, middle of the table.
The person who just stood up?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, for the record to reflect that the witness has identified the defendant, Justin Ross Harris. And if I may approach the witness. Thank you. Ms. Swindell, I'm going to show you some things here that I've marked as states 403, 404, 405, and 406. And if you can, just take these without showing the jury and just look through them real quickly to tell me if you recognize the notebook as being a chat conversation between yourself and Bama XH, and then the photographs coming from those chats. And after reviewing the notebook, and to be fair, have you previously had the opportunity to look at the chats that are contained within that notebook?
Yes.
All right. And that notebook, does it comprise of conversations that you had with Bama XH during this time?
Yes.
And are they an accurate reflection of that conversation?
Yes.
Tender states 403 at this time.
Judge, for all the reasons previously argued, 404, 403, relevant, severance, character, everything you previously argued for objections, I'd like to reassert those, please.
Admitted over objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Swindell, moving on to the photographs, I believe those are 404 through 406. Have you reviewed those as well?
Yes.
All right. And are those photographs taken from the chats contained within the State's Exhibit 403?
Yes.
Tender 404, 405, and 406 at this time.
Same objections.
Same ruling.
Thank you, Your Honor. Specifically looking at State's Exhibit 404, if you can tell me what's in 404.
It's a picture of me.
Okay. And is this a photograph that you sent to Bama XH?
Yes.
And now looking at State's Exhibit 405, what do we see in this exhibit?
It's a picture of him.
And this is the person identified as Bama XH?
Yes.
And I won't publish this last photograph to the jury. I believe they've seen it before. But just as confirmation, looking at 406, if you could tell me what we see there.
It's a picture of his genitals.
And Ms. Swindell, if you can just hold on to this notebook for me and flip to the date of June the 15th. Are you on that date?
Yes.
All right. If you could tell the jury on June the 15th, did you have a chat conversation with the defendant?
Yes.
What was the general nature of that day's conversation?
He said, no AC and kill me. And then I said, I know how that feels, I'm sorry. And then he said, I'm dying.
And when he said he had no AC, what was he referring to?
I think in his car.
And did he actually send you a photograph to follow up with that to show you his state of dress?
Oh, yes.
And where does that photograph appear to have been taken?
It looks like it's his house.
Now, moving forward to June the 18th of 2014, can you confirm for the jury that there was a text conversation between yourself and the defendant on June 18th of 2014?
Yes.
Can you please tell the jury what time the first message was sent between yourself and the defendant on that date?
This says 1:17 p.m.
And to be fair, who sent the first message on that day?
Me.
And did the defendant respond to that message?
Yes.
All right. How long did it take for the defendant to respond to you on June the 18th of 2014?
10 seconds.
And after that, did you send other messages back and forth?
Yes.
All right. In using the application KIC, are there times when you send and receive messages where the content doesn't come through?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can, just say yes or no for the
Oh,
court. I'm
yes.
sorry. And looking at that chat conversation, does it appear as though the defendant sent a message that had that was missing the content at some point during that conversation?
Yes.
All right. And what time did that message come in from the defendant?
2:29 p.m.
And what was the content of that conversation on June the 18th of 2014?
Sexual.
Thank you, Ms. Swindell. That's all I have. I know Mr. Cobler is going to have some questions for you as well.
Ross.
I guess it's still technically morning. Good morning. You all doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. to ask you about what Ms. Treadaway was initially asking you about, and that was when you were a student at the university. Can you tell us what years you were a student at the university?
2011 through 2015.
All right, when did you start there?
August 2011.
You started August 2011?
Yes.
And where were you living in August 2011?
On campus.
Do you know where? Do you remember where?
It was in a dorm. I don't remember the name of it.
All right, so that would have been the fall semester 2011.
Yes.
Okay, in the dorm. And did you meet Mr. Harris that first semester you were in school?
No.
How do you know?
I was in a relationship.
Okay. Who were you in a relationship with in the fall 2011?
Objection, relevance.
I'm testing her memory. She testified about events that occurred quite a few years ago, so I think I need to test her memory.
I sustain the objection.
All right, and what about that next semester, which would have been, I guess we call it spring semester, 2012? Where were you living then?
I was still on campus in the same dorm.
Same dorm, okay. Were you having a relationship with someone that semester as well?
No.
Okay, so you'd already broken it off, okay. And that semester lasts until usually the month of May, right?
The first month of May, or first week of May.
First week of May. All right, so your first year, second semester, your first year would have been over in May of 2012, right?
Yes.
Did you stay for the summer term?
No.
All right. When did you come back to school?
August 2012.
August 2012?
Yes.
All right, and where did you live that semester?
I moved back into a dorm.
Was it the same dorm?
I believe so, yes.
All right, did you have roommates during these semesters?
My first year, yes. My second year, no.
Okay. And do you have any concrete recollection of when you had this tryst or hookup with Mr. Harris?
Not concrete, but I believe it would have been late 2012.
All right, let me ask you this. And I don't mean this in an insulting sort of a way, but was this kind of encounter, was this something unique that perhaps it stands out in your mind? Or was this a common sort of encounter for you?
It wasn't common, but it wasn't anything extraordinary.
Okay. In other words, you've done it before and you've done it since.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do you remember anything about watching the Oscars in February of 2012?
No.
You're not. Okay. All right. If you don't have any really concrete memory, isn't it possible that this encounter could have been that second semester in your first year, which would have been between January and May of 2012? It's possible.
I mean, I really don't think it was, but it's possible, I guess.
It's possible. Okay. And then you never had any more contact with Mr. Harris?
Not in person.
Not in person. Okay. And then somehow you began communicating with him again, maybe 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and how did that recommunication start?
I'm really not sure. It was on Kick, that's all I remember.
On Kick?
Yes.
All right. And you've been provided a copy of the messaging.
Yes.
And, or do you have, okay. And the messaging begins on May the 29th of 2014.
Yes.
Is that about the time that y'all began communicating again?
Yes.
Did I hear you say that you first communicated on Kick, or was it via another application?
I think we first started talking on Scout.
All right, Scout, and then moved to Kick, but it's all basically that's roughly that same time, sort of the end of May,
Yes.
same time frame?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember, did you remember Ross? Did you remember who he was when y'all were communicating?
Yes.
Okay. Did you remember his name?
Yes.
Did you know his name? You did?
Mm-hmm. He went by Justin with me.
You think he went by Justin?
Yes.
You had a chance to speak with a couple of detectives, or at least one detective from Cobb Police. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Right. Was that by telephone?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
2015.
September 2015? Is that so?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever, and you gave an interview, they asked you some questions, and you told whatever you knew, right?
Yes.
You knew you were being recorded.
Yes.
Right. Did you ever have a chance to go back and talk to them, or did they ever come to speak with you?
I think it was just that one conversation.
All right. When did you graduate from the university?
December 2015.
And at that time, you told the detective, and do you remember if it was Detective Stoddard?
I'm not sure. I don't remember who exactly it was.
Do you remember telling him something similar to what you told us this morning about a hookup with Ross in his car?
Yes.
Right. And y'all drove to a random parking place in Tuscaloosa?
Yes.
Okay. And that you did not have sex?
No.
All right. But you performed fellatio on him?
Yes.
And then drove you back?
Yes.
And that was it?
Yes.
Okay. So it was a short sexual encounter?
Yes.
And you conveyed that to Detective Stoddard?
Yes.
And that's basically the same thing you told us?
Yes.
And at that time, that's all it was?
Yes.
Okay. Since then, y'all started having communications again on Kick. And you were asked a couple of things, specifically if y'all exchanged some photographs.
Yes.
And after y'all began communicating, Ross sent you a picture of his privates,
Yes.
right? And you sent him several pictures of you in various states of undress, right?
Yes.
Some fully nudes,
Yes.
okay, and some close-ups of the genital area.
Yes.
Right. And at that time, y'all hadn't met up again or hooked up or anything like that, right?
No.
The only actual meeting you'd had been a couple of years earlier in a car in a parking lot. Okay. And is it fair to say, you've had a chance to look this over, right?
Yes.
It's fair to say that you were interested in having a sexual encounter with Ross again, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were letting him know that in these chats, that you were available and interested?
Yes.
Okay. And at this time, we're talking about now May and into June of 2014, you were in a relationship with somebody else, right?
Yes.
You had a boyfriend.
Yes.
Were you living with him?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, off and on. I went home for the summers.
Okay. You were still at the university? You had a boyfriend? And you began communicating again with Ross?
Yes.
Did you ask him if you could move in with him?
Yes. As a joke.
Yeah, you didn't mean that, did you? You didn't really want to move in with him?
No.
Okay. You didn't use the little LOL, but it was a joke?
Yes.
Okay. You were asked specifically about an image that Ross had sent to you on June the 15th. You see that?
Yes.
All right. And I think you said it looked like he was in his house or on the bed or something of that nature?
Yes.
You don't have any idea when that picture was taken, do you? He sent it to you on the 15th.
Yes.
Could have been taken the year before, as far as you know.
Could have.
All right. So let's go continue on down that page on the 15th. You're talking a little bit about your boyfriend, and then the two of you are talking about maybe some plans, right?
Yes.
See that? Maybe for July?
Yes.
All right. And you agree with me, by looking at the nature of these communications, you were keeping this information secret from your boyfriend?
Yes.
And then into the next day, on the 16th, you sent Ross some close-ups of your private areas.
Yes.
Your privates. Is that right?
Yes.
And you told him that you were having a physiological reaction in your private areas while you were thinking about the two of you.
Yes.
Okay. And you'll come on down to the 18th. That Ms. Treadaway asked you a little bit about the 18th, she asked, you're the one that initiated some conversation on that day.
Yes.
And it looks like first you initiated some conversation at 1:17 in the afternoon
Yes.
on the 18th? Okay. And you expressed in a fashion directly that you were in a state of wanting to have intercourse.
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, you, about 45 minutes later, you expressed to him that you wanted to have his private areas inside of yours.
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, you told him at 2:30, I can almost feel it now.
Yes.
You never heard from him after that, did you?
No.
Miss, Miss Swindell, do you still use the Scout or Kick apps?
No.
All right. Do you still send images of yourself in a state of undress to people?
Objection relevant.
He's done.
You've graduated now. What is it you're doing, ma'am?
I'm working.
You're working, okay. And you've moved away from the university?
Yes.
All right. I apologize. What, are you still in Alabama?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have other interests and other things that you do outside of work?
Objection relevant.
Purpose.
I'm trying to test and find out who this individual is for credibility purposes, Judge.
I sustain the judge.
Well, let me just get right to it and this one down. You're embarrassed about all this, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is, this isn't really who you are, is it? Thank you.
Ms. Swindell, how old were you in 2011?
18.
Do you have any idea how old the defendant was when you first started chatting with him on Scout and then moved over to Kick?
I think he told me he was 26.
During any time that you chatted with the defendant, either going back as early as 2011, 2012, or in 2014, did you have any idea whether or not the defendant actually had attended the University of Alabama or had ever worked there?
He told me he worked on campus. I don't know if he went there or not.
Other than what he told you, did you ever make any independent confirmation of that?
No.
Did you ever learn anything about the defendant's family and whether he had family members in Alabama?
No.
Did you know at any time whether or not the defendant ever visited Alabama for any reason?
No.
In May of 2014, was there any mention whatsoever of Leanna Harris or Cooper Harris to you during those chats?
No.
And if you could open up that notebook again for me and go to the very first set of chats starting on May the 29th of 2014. And to be fair, did you send the first message at that time?
Yes.
All right. And looking down at that first message, what did you say? What was your first message?
Hi.
And what was his response to you?
Hi, sexy.
And did you send a photograph?
Yes.
And what was that photograph of?
My hair.
Is there anything sexual about that photograph?
No.
All right. And in fact, did you go on to explain to the defendant that you had gotten your hair done?
Yes.
And did he comment on that?
Yes.
What did he say to you?
He said, looks nice.
Okay. And after that, did he send immediately another message to follow that up?
Yes.
What did he say to you?
I haven't seen you in so long.
Did you then send a photograph of your face?
Yes.
All right, is it that same photograph that we've blown up and we've tendered as a separate exhibit?
Yes.
All right. And at that point, did he respond to your photograph of your face?
Yes.
What was his response to you?
Cutie.
All right. And did you then respond to him at that point?
Yes.
All right. And did you respond with a smiley face?
Yes.
Is that when he sent you the picture of himself in the tuxedo?
Yes.
All right. And did you comment to him about the photograph of him in his tuxedo?
Yes.
What did you say?
Very nice.
All right. The very next message that you got back after that from the defendant, did it say, "Want to see my new cock pics, LOL"?
Yes.
Is the defendant the first one that brought up sending photographs of his private parts during that time?
Yes.
And had you sent any pictures of your private parts before that, starting on May the 29th?
No.
All right. And did the defendant at that point, in fact, send you 2 pictures of his penis?
Yes.
Immediately after he sent the pictures, did you make a response about seeing the photographs?
Yes.
Okay. What response did you give?
Missed that.
And then did the defendant respond to you immediately, "It misses your perfect mouth"?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Swindell.
You're good to go. Counselor Roach. Call that witness at this time, so we will take a break for our lunch. Closed notepads, open mind, don't discuss the matter, enjoy each other's company. Let's break for lunch. I'd like the state to do a report back into my office at about 10 after 1 and let me know where you are.
Yes, ma'am.
Planning, all right?
Thank you.
Have a good lunch.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes.